Last time we had some issues with people hearing us, and apparently this arrangement should pick everything up adequately, but remember to speak up loud enough so that we can at least hear you from one end of the table to the next. Preliminary questions, details. So I think we are all set. We're starting on tab number 4, which is the police department. And Audrey, you gonna warm us up, or
Sure.
do the
So,
introductions?
for those of you who don't know, this is Randy Gagne. He's our police chief, and he'll be presenting his budget. So, really, the biggest impact to this budget is a new union contract, which was just approved by the select board on Tuesday. And Randy can tell you a little bit more about that, as well as any other areas in his department.
Good evening, thank you. Coming into this year, I knew that we were going to have negotiations, and the prices of doing business were going to be a little more because of the change in wages. So I tried to bring a budget as close to last year's figures as I could. There's a $30,000 increase you'll see in the full-time wages, and that's the COLAs that were given. That's 3% this year to the officers, and it'll be 3% for the next 3 years as well. Each year will be 3%. We've offered to stay competitive because of manpower shortages and being able to recruit quality people. The officers went out and looked at other contracts and what they were offering. Those included educational stipends that we had never given before, shift differential, and we also put a military stipend in for military veterans. That allows us to be at par, or on par with the other agencies around this area. So I can't really compete with the sheriff's departments when they bring a new employee in. The first thing they give them is a cruiser to take home, and they can pretty much use them whenever they want. If we could do that, I think we could recruit a lot of people because it's a very nice town to work in. Knowing that, though, we need to come up with something. And their requests were very reasonable. We have a very good working relationship with our union. We have not had to bring in outside negotiators to negotiate a contract. I think this is the third one where we sit down. I sit down with the union steward, they bring their proposals, we work them out, then we come and we speak with the town manager, and then it goes before the select board for approval. That would be the biggest increase, I think. I'm fine with the town manager's recommendation. We have talked, we took some money out of the small department equipment line to keep the cost down. I was able to buy new radios for the officers this year, so I didn't need to put as much money into that line. We went back and forth a little on the fuel. You never know as far as the price of fuel, what's going to happen with that, because fuel is quite volatile. And like I said, most of the lines matched last year's, and that's what I tried to do to keep the cost down. I understand wholeheartedly it's very expensive to run a police department and our public services. So. Good for any questions if you got any.
Any questions?
How many vehicles do you have?
Currently, we have 3 patrol. I have an unmarked, and we have 1 vehicle that we have not traded. We use it to pick up dogs and things like that. One of those vehicles will be traded out this year when we purchase a new cruiser.
Steve, did you have a question?
No, it's true.
Yep, we look alike. Oh, you have a line item 121, police special duty, and there's no explanation for that. Could you talk about what that is, $3,500?
That is for when officers work details, outside details, but Jody, is there a revenue that offsets that?
Yes.
Yes, what happens is when we do special details, I'll use Drew for an example. If he has an event and they hire an officer, they get billed out for that. But we need money in that account so we can pay that officer until the billing comes in.
Okay, thank you.
Fuel prices are dropping, and you know something we don't?
I've played the gas game long enough that I'm pretty comfortable with that number there. But anytime there's squabble in the fuel-rich countries, you never know what the price of fuel is going to do. So.
Yes, Mark.
Just a informational question. Who is the officer union rep?
Wes Butler is our officer.
I thought so, but I wasn't sure.
Okay, any other questions, any motions on the budget proposal?
I make a motion, we accept the town manager's proposed budget of $1,218,900.
So the town manager proposal is $1,218,900? Yep, that's the one?
That's what it says, yep,
Yep.
yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Thank you, motion carries. And the next item, county dispatch?
Yes, so I can talk about this, and Chris Farley can answer any detailed questions, because he sits as the chair of the board to the Knox County Regional Communications Center. So this is really Camden's fee that we pay to have dispatch services that are provided by Knox County. So the dispatchers are the ones who take all the 911 calls, and they send out our police, fire, and ambulance provider, depending on who's needed. And there's quite an increase over the past year. They're having, I think this is something that a lot of people are familiar with, the fact that across the nation, really, it's hard to find 911 dispatchers. Knox County is having a difficult time recruiting and retaining people. So I think that they've been looking at different incentives and how do they become more competitive in wages and benefits to be able to attract dispatchers. I believe that they're down 4 people currently. So I think that this is part of their recruitment strategy. Am I right, Chris, that there is some increase? Yeah. So that's really the impetus behind the increase in cost this year over last year.
Okay, any questions on dispatch? Motions? Mark?
First of all, or question first, we have no say in that amount. That's a bill to us amount. So we can't
Correct.
say we want to cut it.
Correct.
Okay.
Unless we don't want dispatch services.
I'll make the motion that we accept the number presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Are we going to talk about cruisers?
So this is something that we could talk about as well. Just, sorry, it was a little deferral. So I've put together kind of like information on the majority of our capital projects. And I gave it to everyone tonight so that you could look through, and the department heads would come back and talk about all the capital projects. But if anybody has questions about, police cruisers tonight, we could certainly answer any of them.
Okay, so you want to do the capital projects at a later time?
Yeah, I thought next meeting, if we could talk
Okay.
about them together, it might be
Okay.
a nice way to get everybody familiar with them.
And so basically, this is on page 41, am I in the right place?
Yep.
And it's line 2004-4101 with, I am in tab number 9, page 41.
Nothing in there. There's nothing in there.
If we can discuss the cruiser tonight, would say Randy having to come back another week?
Well, I think this is your opportunity to ask him questions about the proposal. I think we'll actually vote on the capital improvements later on. But
What if you don't have anything under tab 9?
Should be underneath.
I got an empty book.
Andy, what cruiser would you like to see?
Any of those cruisers would work fine. What I did last year is we bought a Dodge Charger. That's an all-wheel drive. It does have a V8 motor in it. The select board has asked me to look into hybrids because one of their goals is to get into greener vehicles. So what I have done is I have looked at There are several options for hybrids. One of those is a Ford Fusion, which is a front-wheel drive only. It's a pursuit rated. It's called the Ford Responder. I've actually tried one of these out. They have one in Augusta. Not a bad car. I don't think we could ever use it as a full-time patrol vehicle because it's smaller. It's about the size of the Impala that I drive now. By the time you put a cage in that, or a petition, getting prisoners in the back of that is quite problematic. Now, if we're just looking for something to replace the vehicle that I currently have, which is a Chevy Impala, which has got 100,000 miles on it, or will have, that vehicle has served me well. I've had it since 2012. It's just a regular passenger car.
Thank you very much.
That Ford Fusion responder vehicle was estimated to cost about $32,000. Now, that doesn't include any of the lights. And the cruiser that's assigned to me, I have limited lighting. It's not a car that we would use for patrol, but it's something that I can respond in emergencies. It would be equipped with front and rear lights, side lights, and the radio, of course. And by the time you outfit that with labor, you know, you're into the $3,000 to $5,000 range. A radio alone for that's probably $1,000. And we're upgrading radios to go to dual band type radios that will offer digital service when digital service becomes mandatory. So we're trying to get a step ahead of that, so we'll be ready for that. If we're looking to get something, the Ford Interceptor SUV hybrid comes in at $36,000. One thing we could do is that's probably the vehicle down the road that we are going to use for a primary patrol vehicle, if we're going to go with the hybrids. Ford is putting a big push on those. That is going to be the frontline vehicle that they will offer. You will have to order a non-hybrid if you wish to have a non-hybrid vehicle. The hybrids, as you can see, are a bit more expensive. The reason I would like to try one of those, it's the first year model. I would like to put one of those into service. One, if we had a catastrophic failure with one of our other ones, the equipment most likely will fit from that one into this one. It would give us a while to make sure that's the vehicle that we want to go with. This is my first venture into hybrids, so it's got a combined fuel mileage rating of 24 miles per gallon. The Fusion Responder, I think that one was 38. When you look at the Interceptor, as you can see, the prices for the Fusion Hybrid are $32,000. The Interceptor SUV regular non-hybrid is $33,000, and the hybrid is $36,000. On the other end of the scale, a Dodge Charger, all-wheel drive, comes in at $24,500. Dodge is pretty much giving those cars away. You're not going to get the fuel mileage out of that. You will a hybrid, but if you want to start going down that road, you're going to have to spend the extra money to get there.
But down the road, you'd be preferring to get a hybrid and big enough to put a cage in.
Yeah, and I think that SUV Interceptor hybrid is going to be the next up-and-coming.
And you would use that for a year to determine if...
Yeah, I could use it for a year, or we could keep it, because we're into a cycle now that we're going to have to start replacing our two other Interceptors. So, I mean, that could be a long-term vehicle for me to use. Then we would have all vehicles that are basically the same and interchangeable if we needed. We've had catastrophic failures when we rolled a vehicle over before. That's something we could slide into line if we needed to in a pinch. I would like to have the opportunity to test that out. I understand that's a lot of money.
Question on, when you say hybrid,
Yep.
okay, that means electric in some form, correct?
It does. It's not a plug-in hybrid.
That's
Because
because my question.
Unless you're going to buy me 500 miles of
End
extension
up
cord.
with charging stations and other expenses above and beyond just the vehicle.
I can't see us going to a plug-in hybrid because we need to be able to go at a moment's notice. And I don't know enough about the plug-in hybrids.
And how do you charge it then?
This charge is
and you run it.
it's all self-contained. It's like the Prius. Yeah,
There's probably no such thing as a plug-in hybrid.
Yeah, there
A
is.
plug-in is a plug-in.
Yeah,
A
there actually
hybrid is a mixture of a battery power and a motor which recharges the battery.
They do make a Fusion Responder administrative that is a plug-in type hybrid. Yeah.
Tell me one thing, how much zip does this car have? How fast
More
is
zip
it?
than-
The Fusion is, I believe, I'd have to double check, but it's maybe one of the faster production police cars. I was impressed with it. It really, it was about the same as my Impala as far as pickup. I think you get in trouble watching which is going, the energy or the gas, but
What is the policy on high-speed chases?
when I became police chief, I've never been an advocate for police chases because they end up damage, lives lost. I don't like them. But I live in reality that there are times that we have to chase people. I have severely limited our officers as to when they can chase someone. Our officers right now cannot engage in a pursuit unless they have supervisor approval first.
So in a sense, it doesn't make that much difference to
pursuit
have
rating-
a real speedy vehicle if you're not going to engage.
No, but we do have an obligation to put our officers in pursuit-rated vehicles in case they have that situation where they do engage in a chase. And when I say engage in a chase, I'm talking serious felony, bank robbery where there's been injury, somebody's about to commit an arson, moving from one place to anything in that category. But every chase that we would be involved in would be highly scrutinized by myself and the review panel after the fact.
Well, you don't just need speed for chasing. I mean, you want to get to a scene of a crime quickly.
And we have policies governing the speeds of emergency driving and things like that, but they are better built vehicles. They have more of a high-performance type braking system, suspensions and things like that.
Which one is considered the safest? What do you consider? The occupants?
They're all pretty much the same as far as, I'm not sure.
I know the police forces at one time preferred large rear-wheel drive, like the Crown Vics and everything considered, I don't know if it was comfort, safety, what it was about them, but.
And then Crown Vic started getting rear-ended and
Right.
blowing up.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that, these are tested by the Michigan State Police. They're tested by a number of agencies for safe operation. Ford, the Interceptor hybrid, the Interceptor SUV, excuse me, we were going through a series of officers passing out in them because of carbon monoxide. So the first thing we did was we bought carbon monoxide detectors for the inside of the vehicles. Come to find out, it was retrofitting the cruisers and not filling holes and things that was allowing that. But as soon as we saw the first reports, we bought monitors to put in there. We never had one go off.
What's the, so we're spending 13 grand on gas and diesel now. What do you expect like a savings if you did go to hybrid? Anything?
That's something I'd have to see after a year.
The mileage was, what was the mileage between the two?
38 on the Fusion,
Yep.
and 24 combined is what they give for the SUV hybrid.
How's that
Electric.
compared to the regulars?
Off the top of my head, I'm going to say the Dodges that we have are probably in the 14 to 19 mile range. I mean, it's going to be different. Police driving
They're
is
heavy.
different. It's
The
not-
cars are heavier too because you've added all this
Yeah.
equipment to them, yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
One of the reasons that we're looking at hybrids is the encouragement of the select board, because one of the things we're looking on beyond just the cruisers is we've joined the Global Covenant of Mayors, and we're tasked with reducing our carbon footprint for the town. And one of the things we can do to make a dramatic effort there is getting these cruisers. So it was at the select board's urging that Randy, the chief, looked into this.
Well, I like it. I like it because you're spending a lot of money on gas and diesel. Hopefully it reduces over time, and it's cool. So, I'm into it.
Like I said, any of these cruisers would work. It depends on what we want to do with it.
So that
The Fusion is a little smaller. The trunk, because the batteries are in the back. I won't go into what I carry for gear with me, but I do carry a lot of gear in the trunk. I need to be able to respond to any type situation, so I make sure that I have plenty of equipment that I might need for anything. But, it works.
So, yes, Dick.
Do you have officer cameras?
We do not have body cameras.
That's what I meant, yeah.
We have cameras in our cruisers. We have cameras in our interview rooms. The officers also have remote mics for the camera. When they're outside the car, they can record up to 600 feet, so we get audio. But we have not gone down the road of body cameras at this point. I'm still watching the flow of the nation as to what the storage requirements are going to be. Maine just has tabled a bill, I believe, for mandatory body-worn cameras for every police officer in the state. And another unfunded state mandate that is going to cost a lot of money when this happens, because every officer will have to have a camera. They will have to have it on. You will have to store that. It's going to be quite costly.
When does that go into effect?
They've tabled that bill, so
Oh, yeah.
it's not going through this session. I'm sure it's going to keep coming up.
Should we start planning for that in the budget? Sounds like it, no?
I think it's coming down the road. You know, I've been watching I know the Maine Chiefs of Police Association, the Sheriff's Association, unless the state's going to kick in a pile of money for it, I mean, it's going to be very expensive. I mean, one of those cameras is probably $1,000. And that's not the downloading software, that's not the storage. And can you imagine, we run 24 hours a day with officers. So you're going to have 24 hours of storage. There'll be times that they don't have to have it on, but for the most part, it's pretty much going to be on.
This maybe should have come up earlier when we were talking about your actual budget. But is there any contingency fund in your line of budget as an emergency backup, as a,
To cover cost of the cameras down the road.
I'm trying to keep the budget down, so no, we haven't done it.
yeah.
If you want to give me a whole bunch, I'll take it.
I'm just wondering if there was anything there at this point in time.
I believe if that came down as a mandate, say, in October, and we didn't know about, I believe we'd have plenty of time, because once it was implemented, once it was passed, you'd have so much time to implement it. I mean, I think the implementation on that, if it had passed, I'd have to double check, but I think it was 2021. So you'd have some time in there to make arrangements for that.
And we typically, set up like a reserve account if we knew something like that was coming, to give us some time to plan ahead and budget for it.
Or I'll just have to come and ask Audra really nicely to give me lots of money, and she'll have to convince the select board.
Any other questions? So the discussion about the vehicles is something that we'll actually vote on later on. It's kind of an informational part, so when we get to that later, we'll have that info. So I think
Do you have extra of those handouts?
I do. Did anyone not get them? Kathy, I don't think I ordered.
Well, I've got, there are these two, but I don't have the car one.
The other one. Carla, Kathy.
I'll keep you honest.
So we don't really have anything to vote on at this point. And everybody's all set, and thank you to the chief for coming tonight, and also for hosting us earlier this year, and we all showed up at the station. Appreciate that. Yeah.
Like I said, we're open 24/7, stop in any time.
Thank you.
How long is it?
Okay.
See Chris over here.
Chief Farley, I think you are up for our fire and rescue department. And again, I think I'll ask Audra if she wants to do any preliminary comments on the budget.
So for those of you who don't know, this is Chief Farley. He's our fire chief. Really, his budget, there's a little bit of a decrease, and really that's just come down to employee benefits. Everything else, pretty much, it's kind of status quo from this year to last year. No equipment purchases, really, or anything else to speak of that's in the operational budget. So unless you have any more comments about any of your items.
No, it's, as Audra said, it's pretty much the same. It went down a little bit because of the adjustment in healthcare.
Can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
I'm going to have to defer to
Okay.
Jody.
In this current year, when we were working on the budget for FY19, there was a little bit of uncertainty about possibly one of our firefighters, our full-time firefighters, may be moving on. So hearing that, we made the choice to budget for a family plan for the health insurance. Thankfully, we still have our great staff, full-time staff, and it's not necessary for this year, so we have not carried that.
So your actuals for FY19 will probably be a lot lower than budget, is that?
Yes.
And so we're reflecting that reality adjustment in this year's budget, okay.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Chief?
And that's pretty much it. We made a couple of adjustments in some lines. We had some increase in our personal protective equipment, so there's a line, that item's increased beyond that.
Any questions?
Question?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a large increase in vehicle repairs from the FY19 budget. Could you explain that?
And that's pretty much, bear in mind, we have about over $2 million worth of equipment, so that line is pretty actually small for maintenance. And so we just, that's a more realistic number in terms of what we've been spending this year.
Are there specific projects or across the board things just need to be spruced up a little bit?
So the newest vehicle is 6 years old, so we're talking about a fleet that ranges in age from, the newest is 2013 to 1981. Those vehicles cost money to keep them on the road.
Okay.
Nothing specific. We did have an unexpected repair, a brake repair on a truck this year that was a little bit of surprise, so we decided to take a look at what we're actually spending and what we're budgeting and increase the line for that reason.
Okay, thank you.
This year's actual will come in over what?
It sure will.
Okay, thanks for the warning.
Thank you.
When do you see the next replacement vehicle, like when you have to replace a vehicle?
That's, every apparatus has a replacement date on it, and that's really kind of a bigger, at this point, a bigger picture question that goes along kind of with the ambulance conversation.
We're keeping reserve funds for fire trucks, and I think, again, in 9 and on page 39, it looks like we're allocating another $5,000 to the reserve for the fire truck. I don't know what the total reserve amount is, but, you know, when we get to that question, we can take a look at that in more detail. But
That $5,000 is actually part of a repair to a 1995 truck to do some body work on it to extend its life. That's not actually to purchase a new vehicle, it's to do a repair, to a corrosion repair.
yes, Mark?
Similar question on your air tanks and your respirators and the things that the equipment that the men wear. I know a few years back there were some issues with mandatory replacement of some of that kind of equipment. How is that project continuing?
So, thanks to the support of the community last year, we did purchase all brand-new SCBA, so that's all new. The personal protective equipment that the firefighters each wear, we replace that at least every 10 years.
Okay. And that's all in the planning stage. It was last year that I remember reading about everything mandatory replacement stuff, so, okay.
Do we do all the repairs to the vehicles ourselves, the town of Camden, or does somebody do it from the outside?
It depends on the extent of the repair. We either can do some of it in-house, some of it gets done at the Public Works Garage. If it's beyond that, such as the brake job, we don't want to do brake jobs on a fire truck. That was done at East Coast Service Center in Casco because of the technical nature of the job.
Okay. How much goes out of house? 30% of the major repairs?
Anything of a major repair that's going to affect the chassis or the pump is done out of house.
Anyone else? Yes,
Computer and office equipment is listed as 0 in the budget this year. Is that because
Yes.
everything is up to date and snuff and there's nothing, you know?
Well, kind of. So I think a few years back, all of the different departments, they kind of separated out computer purchase to each of the individual departments. And we all kind of collectively felt that it was more difficult to keep track of our assets as a network when we did that. So we pulled it all back into that one IT line that we talked about last time.
Okay.
So that includes everyone. So if Chris or one of the other firefighters need a new computer or, any sort of IT equipment, it would come
It's
from
a
that line.
town-wide thing
Yeah.
as opposed to individual. Thank you.
Yes, yeah.
questions?
So your hose testing budget, is this just reflective of the fact that you have a vendor doing it instead of just hiding in the work you guys are doing on your own? Okay.
Correct. Yep.
Anyone else? Motions?
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the manager and the chief's recommendation.
Second.
Okay, second?
Second.
I second it.
Okay. Okay, any further discussion? Ready to vote? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Motion passes. And next, we are on to public safety building.
All right, so this cost area really has to do with the upkeep of the public safety building that contains both the police and the fire department. And a lot of the, sort of day-to-day maintenance and overseeing of the building, Chief Farley directly oversees all of that and prepares the budget. So he can answer any detailed questions about this. Really, the increases come down to sort of the part-time wages in regards to this. Really, everything else, it's just trying to reflect sort of the actual costs associated with operating that building. And we will talk a little bit during the capital projects about the HVAC system, because we've been experiencing problems with that for years and years, and really we're getting to a point where we need to make some decisions about what we do with the HVAC. Do you have any?
No, just the part-time wages, that used to be in the budget, and several years ago, it came out, and so we're just recommending that we put it back in, and we've talked with the person who does the cleaning of the building here and have him come down for several hours a week.
Any other questions? Motions?
Move the town manager's budget line for public safety building of 45,370.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, motion passes. And now we're on to hydrant assessment.
All right, so this is the fee that we pay to Maine Water to ensure that they're providing water to our hydrants. And really just a 5% cost increase over the past year. And it's pretty much a placeholder because at this stage, we haven't gotten the exact amount that they're going to be charging us. But usually it's around about a 5% increase, so we thought that would be a safe
And
assumption.
this is another one of these non-negotiable items that we encounter. Any questions? Yes, Mark?
I know it's non-negotiable, but how do they base that fee? How does Maine Water come up with that fee? Is it based on the number of hydrants? Is it based on the number of residents or the?
I think it's number of hydrants and their, whatever their rates are, they factor it all in. I'm not sure how they calculate it. Do you know any more behind that?
That, and the PUC allows them to to have, for a portion of their budget to come from having that water sitting there available.
Okay.
Yes, Kathy?
So this is just for the water, it's not about them replacing the hydrants on their own schedule? Is that incorporated in there? They probably pass those expenses on, because they have a rotation of improvement, right?
Right, they have a replacement schedule. They usually consult with us in terms of what they're up to, and if they're doing work somewhere, somewhere, and there's an opportunity to add some hydrants somewhere, they usually touch base with us, but the replacement schedule is completely theirs.
So we don't get billed for that, so that probably is reflected in here somehow, somewhere.
Yep.
So this bill really isn't for the water, it's for the hydrant
As well.
rental.
Right, and for having the water available should we need it. Yeah.
How much do hydrants cost? And it's kind of like the street light concepts, right? We're buying those. Have you guys looked at buying the hydrants, or is it just not?
I think because
don't do
of,
it.
I think because of the water and how it's provided and the pressurization and all of that, it's one of those,
It's all part of their distribution system.
yeah.
How many hydrants are there? Does anyone know?
In town,
Yeah, what we're paying for within this budget.
110.
You divide 110 into 265, what's that per hydrant? Somebody have a calculator?
$2,700.
Roughly 2,500.
Are there places in town where you wish you had more hydrants?
Well, the hydrant district is basically in town. There's nothing beyond Hofstas Drive, 105, and
About $2,400.
Hopkins Lane on Route 52.
$2,400 per hydrant.
There's no
Wow, that's
areas
pretty
that you look at and say, we really need one, A, B, C, these places.
There's not really much of an option to, unless the water mains are going to be extended to say we need more hydrants here. That's within the district. If there's an opportunity, if they're working somewhere, we recently added one over on Park Street. I said they recently added one over on Park Street.
Just to go into worst case scenario, if you guys had to do a bunch of water capture from any of the bodies of water for a big mountain fire or something, would they come back and charge us for that? Do you know what I mean? If you guys had to take a lot of water buckets from any of the bodies of water? Not that you've ever done that, but it's possible, right? Because you guys have made bodies of water.
We haven't made any bodies of water.
Well, didn't you do something when you did that controlled burn where you made a little body of water and you pumped the water?
We have portable tanks, yes, and we'll fill those and then pump from there. So if we're taking water from a pond somewhere, no, there's no. Or
That's on you to do fire maintenance, you pay for the helicopter and you do all that craziness.
Helicopter is a service provided by the Maine Forest Service.
Maybe that's where I'm getting confused when I had that, went to your class and heard about it.
Any other questions?
We need a helicopter.
I think it's very dangerous to put
Way on uni,
that in front of the select board, they may get some idea.
I would suggest not saying that again because Andrew Lowe keeps asking me for a helicopter repeatedly. And I keep telling him no.
He's going to get all excited.
I know.
Motion that we accept
Yes.
town manager's
Request on this. Okay, second? Second. Any more discussion?
Yeah, I think that figure of $2,400
And nine.
for a hydrant year after year, is there any comparable costs for other communities? That seems to me to be excessive. And I'm not going to vote against it.
A hydrant would be for the pipes and for them to be able to supply water
Chief, are you aware of any towns that own their own hydrants?
They're typically owned by the water company. And again, the PUC and the legislature allows them to get revenue from having those there because it's having the water available. There is benefit from that. Not having the water there means that our insurance ratings in the downtown area would be doing this because the water's not readily available, and we would be paying for it one way or the other. People within the hydrant district have a lower fire premium because the water's readily available. If that water was not readily available, Drew's insurance premium over at Lyman Morris would be significantly higher than it is.
And also a lot of.
Consequences of privatized water.
I was just going to say that.
We've provided them with the opportunity to have a monopoly in our town, and the cable company actually pays us for use of the public right-of-way. The water company is very, very profitable. It's a publicly traded company that does extremely well. So I don't know that we have much history of actually pushing back on much of anything. Certainly good discussion.
I think where you and I were confused is that we thought it was for the hydrants, but it's not just for the hydrants. It's for the access to the water pipes and the water pipes going up to it. That's kind of what you're getting charged for. Is that so? It's not just a hydrant at $2,400, essentially.
But it is, I mean, it is a good
It's the
point, because a
network.
lot of towns own their own, they have their own water districts and they own, the distribution system.
If it was a municipal water company,
Right.
I classify it here as a hydrant.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. Yeah.
So if you draw water through the hydrant, then you're paying for all that water too? So that's
The water's free.
free?
There is no
It's
meter
free,
on
it's free
each
water.
hydrant.
What exactly?
Right, okay.
Yeah, if they need to open a hydrant and leave it going 24/7,
$9.
there's no charge for it.
I mean, I think the way to conceptualize it, it's a full infrastructure, not just the little red thing above ground.
Right.
That, the way they allocate it is apparently per hydrant, but it's obviously for the town's benefit for fire protection, that is how they are charging us to maintain that infrastructure. Obviously, there's a lot of private people taking off the same water sources, but for the town's benefit through hydrants, that's the cost that we're getting hit with.
We don't pay, if we were to open a hydrant or if we were to refill a truck down in the public safety building, we don't get paid for it. We don't get charged for that water.
Okay.
And the hydrants are sitting there and available, but they don't necessarily go around to maintain them in the wintertime. We go around and clean them out in the wintertime. That would be nice if, because we're paying that much, if they actually made them accessible.
Is there an actual water meter for the public safety building?
For the
A monthly bill
for domestic water, yes.
domestic water? Yeah. Okay, so it's a separate line that comes in that you're using to fill the trucks with and, okay.
Yeah, hook up to a hydrant. Any more discussion? That's a good idea. Okay, we have a motion seconded. All those in favor? Opposed?
Hey,
Okay, unopposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, now we are on to, where's our next project here? Emergency medical services, is that the ambulance? Is that
It is.
accurate shorthand for that?
It is. So for this number that's proposed, we haven't negotiated the renewal to the contract with Northeast for this year. So I put in a pretty conservative number. I don't anticipate a major price increase like we saw last year. So that's why that particular number is there and that particular level of increase. I think it's reasonably conservative. But and we talked about this last week. We thought it would be a good time to talk to the budget committee where there's no sort of pressure to make a financial decision. This year it's just proposing kind of status quo with Northeast. But there has been discussion about potentially trying to look at a regional ambulance service, working with the town of Rockland. And so we wanted to talk to everybody about that a little bit more. We thought this would be a good opportunity just to get, feedback from more people in the community, especially the budget committee, given, your responsibilities in the town. And I think it's a nice time to do it because you don't have that pressure of making a decision. So it's a full year of thinking about this and determining what we want to do as a community and kind of putting the idea out there and getting some feedback. So I asked Chief Farley and our firefighter, Matthew Heath, to come up with a presentation to kind of explain the EMS system that we have now and what we would potentially be looking at if we wanted to pursue the partnership with the city of Rockland, and just kind of explain what's the difference between those two systems, what are the benefits and drawbacks to each, and, what's the recommendation for moving forward. So I've got your presentation on here.
We do this up on the screen?
Yep.
Okay, great.
And so too, as a little backdrop to that, we're always talking about needing more firefighters. That's a nationwide problem. So what do we do to get more involvement in the fire department? And this is a way to do that. One of the things that we've done over the last couple of years is we've taken on some code enforcement responsibility and education and been helping out there. And this is another way to make the employees at the fire department more resourceful. And so when the idea came up about doing this together with other communities, it was just very natural to me that we start to do that.
You think this would be like an attraction to bring more people in to help you, or is that,
Yeah. I mean, it's gonna cost more. We're gonna need some more full-time employees, but I think it offers more opportunities. Yeah.
Do you see this happening with the fire department as being one unit down the road, like the police, or do you see some changes on that level too?
I've been saying for many, many years that it's very difficult for each individual community to maintain its own fire department. And I guess to answer your question directly is, I think this is a way to start to
First
do that.
step?
Yes.
Step.
Yes. And I think this is, if we go down this road, this is like we need to have a 3, 5, 7, 10-year plan in mind about where we're headed with it.
You could follow behind this. If this was successful, you could see the fire departments doing the same thing, Camden, Rockland, Rockport.
I can see it, yes.
That's what I mean.
The question is, can we convince other people to have that too? Yes. But yes, I can see that. Yep.
All set for presentation?
Yeah, all good.
Great.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know me, like Audra said, my name is Matt Heath. I'm one of the full-time firefighters here. And I've been working on this project for a couple months now, doing some research. And this is just kind of a little synopsis of what I've gathered. So as most of you know, we have Northeast, they're a private company. And I was trying to look at what are some of the problems, not just with Northeast individually, but with private ambulances in general. Because this isn't just a Northeast thing, this is just private services are different than municipal service. So what are some of the drawbacks to having that private service? And so as one thing we've noticed, an increasing amount of money. Fiscal year 17 was 25,000, went up to 32, and then up to 140,000. And though all those numbers are really cheap for EMS, it's not a profitable business, and so those prices that's a really good deal. But as you can see, it's going up, and that's something that is just going to keep happening because it's just not realistic over the long term. So I think you'll find that upward trend is something that will continue to happen. With that, they need to make money. So if they don't make money, they go out of business. The way you make money in this field is you do transfers. So for those of you who don't know what a transfer is, it's when you take an ambulance and a crew and you bring someone from the senior citizens home to the hospital, or from one hospital to another hospital, or hospital back to the home, something like that. And you're able to make a lot more money. It's pretty low overhead. And that's what tends to happen. With that, you're taking an ambulance off the road and away from 911 calls. And so what that leads to is a limit in your 911 service, because some of the ambulances are out there doing these transfers to make money because they have to. Yes?
May not be appropriate at this point in time, but is the vehicle required for transport required to have the same equipment and manpower as an ambulance? Is that a requirement?
I don't know for sure. I know they have some ambulances that are, they're like little sprint vans. So it's not necessarily the box ambulance that you see. It's a different class of ambulance. I don't know the exact differences. And it's not as equipped, but there are some urgent care transfers that do need a full ambulance and paramedics and.
It would depend on the level of care that the patient needed in terms of what the equipment on the vehicle is.
Okay, because I'm thinking just the thought of basically a taxi ride versus a true ambulance ride. You know, and if they have to use the full ambulance for nothing more than just because that's what's available.
Right.
I think it varies, but I think ambulances do get used because they're there a lot, and they have to buy them anyway. So since it's there, and at that moment it's not doing anything, they can get used for that.
I can also say, sorry, from experience, that sometimes transfer from home, but also from home to home, is not necessarily just in a wheelchair, just needs a seat. Is somebody that's going from supported oxygen or whatever, they've gone for x-rays. I mean, these are people who are really need that level of care, even though they're just doing a transport, because they need something at the hospital that the rest home can't give them. And that happens a lot. And so, yes, they need the full ambulance.
And those are good questions, and are all things that eventually we would need to take a look at. For example, there are times when the ambulance gets called to, say, Windward Gardens, and it's just simply to help put somebody back in bed. So do you actually need to send an ambulance to that, or could you just send a person over to it? And then those are all questions that we would have to get into.
Very directly, depending on need. There is no one size fits all.
Yes.
Thank you.
Another thing, loss of control. So ambulance is a public safety function, and since it's not run by the municipality, that we don't have as much control over that. So as the town changes, the community changes, it's harder for us to force them to adapt to that change as compared to, the select board or the townspeople to force the fire department or the police department to make those changes, because they're on their own timeline, their own schedule. Another thing is it's difficult to monitor contract agreements. So we have a contract agreement, for example, right now with Northeast. So they have to provide a certain level of service, certain amount of paramedics on at a time, things like that. Have to have a certain response time, and it can be difficult to monitor that because you're going off what they're telling you, but there's no way to necessarily know that what they're telling you is correct unless you go through the records yourselves and go, okay, yeah, they responded in 10 minutes or 9 minutes or whatever. And so that can become an issue, as opposed to if you do it yourself, you're running those numbers anyway, and it's easy for you to gauge your own.
Is there any indication that they're lying in that? I mean, that's...
So we can kind of verify response times, because we could independently go to the RCC and get those numbers. Is there a way to verify that they have X number of ambulances available as the agreement says? No, because they're not very forthcoming with that information. And I think we often hear from employees that, you don't have an ambulance. There's nobody covering you guys right now. So that does that show up in the quarterly report? I don't think it does.
But that's not really my question. My question is, are there instances where you know that they've said one thing and something has not been true?
I think it's fair to say that, yes.
And it has impacted service?
Or it gets covered by Rockland.
Or has the potential to impact service if something happens.
Do they record how many times, for example, Rockland has to provide mutual aid? I know I see the ambulance go past, Rockland ambulance go past my house every so often. Is that documented somewhere as things like that? Out of curiosity.
It's supposed to be a part of the quarterly report, yes.
Okay.
I'm sure Rockland documents it.
Yes.
I don't. Yeah, I mean, from what I heard, just in the last couple of months of doing due diligence on that, and we haven't nailed down what the discrepancy is, but Rockland had reported to us that they have run about 22 mutual aid calls in a certain period of time since last summer, but Northeast for some reason seems to think the number is only 6. So can't figure out where the discrepancy is, but there's a discrepancy somewhere. So that's just one example of, the number is actually triple what was being reported. Don't know if it's just a clerical error or something missing, but that's something that I noticed.
And in terms of impacting service, we went to Lincolnville on a building fire. It was just over the Camden town line in August of 2016. We needed ambulances. We got one ambulance from Northeast. We had to wait for ambulances from Rockland. We had 2 fire victims there. Neither one of them who survived. We needed more ambulances that night. They did not come.
So is it fair to say what you're getting at is a question of coverage? You think that if you have this regional approach, you're going to have more predictable coverage, and then the municipalities and the regional setup will be able to better allocate their resources, or at least know what they have with a little more certainty than you have now?
That's one of the benefits. Yes.
That's a benefit.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, we're talking now about coverage and availability.
Yes. Yeah, you have much more control over that, much more insight into what's going on. Definitely.
I guess the benefit of the system we have right now is it's very inexpensive. And the reason it's very inexpensive is because it's split between 911 and interfacility transfers. So, but the downfall of that is it's very unpredictable as to whether or not we're going to have the level of service available when we need it.
So we're getting what we're paying for.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can add a couple things. I'm the chair of the EMS, the 4-town committee, and I think that the latest contract, we're supposed to have 3 ambulances during the day, 2 at night. If I remember, that's what it was before, with a certain level of paramedics on duty. And what happens is, and private ambulance company makes their money on transfers, as Matt said, because those often are almost always paid by Medicare. They're guaranteed payment for those transfers. 911 calls, ambulance companies lose money because very often they get called to an accident and it's as a precaution and there's nobody to take away. They get called, somebody doesn't have insurance, so they lose money on those things. So they're in business to do the transfers. And if they get a call for 2 transfers and they're out, and that one of those needs a paramedic on duty because of the care of the person, and then we get a call for a 911 call for an emergency, they may not have a paramedic available. They may only have 1 ambulance available because they got transfers. Sometimes the transfers involve, they actually take people down to Portland or some other far away. So we can't control the way they like to set up the contract is percentage-wise, most of the time we will be able to handle this. I'm aware of a situation where last week I had occasion to talk to one of the paramedics on their staff, and the person said that they were the only paramedic in the district that particular day. And so if they had more than 1 call at a time for a paramedic situation, and you were the person that they were responding for, you very likely would not have a paramedic on that ambulance, or they would have to call for Rockland support. And that's the problem, is we can't control how effective they are. If we had our own service, we knew our people were staffed with 911, we have people that live in the area and make a good living, it becomes a career, not a job, then we have more control on it. And for me, no matter what else the town of Camden does, no matter what else we go through this budget, we talk about, street lights or electricity or all the other services we do, I think the number 1 service is somebody in our town, one of our citizens has to call 911 for some kind of service, whether it be police or fire or EMS. That's the most important thing we provide. That safety factor is what's more important than anything else we do. And this is up in the game for that. And in addition, what it does is it's really hard. We used to have very large volunteer crews for the fire department. And people don't have the ability to volunteer anymore because the world has become so much busier. So we've had to increase the staff. Now, if we increase the staff a little bit more, and we have paramedics on duty at our fire station, and they're cross-trained in fire, and our firefighters are cross-trained in paramedic or EMT, we have a more efficient use of our emergency workers. And so it's better for the fire department as well, because they can respond to more things, they can do more things. It makes a lot of sense.
What level of medical training do the first responders have now, as far as firefighters and police officers in town? Do they have any medical, they have no?
There's no requirement to have any.
Basic first aid and CPR. Basics.
I lived in, it was Connecticut, but I lived in a town of Connecticut where every police officer was an EMT, for example. Everyone had EMT training. And so right now you're waiting for, it's not waiting for an ambulance, it's waiting for medical personnel is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Matt, do you have more to go in the presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's
Okay.
get on with that. And I mean, just as a comment, we're sort of laying the groundwork to have knowledge about a budgetary question that will become a lot more relevant perhaps in years to come, where we'll be looking at what's it really going to cost if we participate in something regional. But tonight we're just getting information because our budget number in front of us is sort of a conservative guesstimate at this point. But just keeping that in mind, there will be some probably much more interesting discussions when you start to see real numbers that the commitment to do this might create. So, Matt, if you would finish up.
Yes, yeah, so and then that one last bullet point is just if they're not making enough money, there's two things they can do, and both of them are negative to us who are receiving that service. So our initiative that we're doing is we're trying to research multiple different variances in EMS that we might be able to use. I've been doing this research. I've been doing it through the Center for Homeland Defense and Security for this class that I'm in. And with that, I've been able to get a directory of fire chiefs and EMS personnel from all over the United States at some pretty high levels. And I've been in contact with them. And this is a list of people, or towns and cities that I've talked to, and I've seen what they do. And a lot of them have similar issues, or they've done this already. And so they've been able to provide some insight. And you can see the populations in our population and the population of the 5 towns that hopefully will be part of this service. So it's pretty similar, and they had a lot of good insight, and so that's what we're trying to base it off of. And using them as references as we go through. So, I mean, we've talked about this a little bit already. One of the big things I think is the population is aging all throughout the United States, but there's a lot of nursing homes here, and our population is aging as well, just in our community. And as that happens and as time goes on, some of the government benefits that elderly people use now to receive care are going to be less or non-existent in 10, 20, 30 years. And so when that happens, there's going to be more reliance on emergency care for those elderly people. And kind of goes into the control thing. If we can't control that and make adaptations to cover that, we're going to be having a serious issue with some of our population to make that happen for them. It provides a better all hazard response for fire personnel. So we're supposed to be trained to kind of do everything, and right now, like we said, we don't have that medical training, and that can be an issue because sometimes you might be out doing something, you might be on a fire call, for a CO alarm, carbon monoxide, and someone might have carbon monoxide poisoning. And you might not, the ambulance might be, a couple miles away. It's good that you can respond right there because you have that training. Or last night I read an article about some firefighters who, their truck got hit on the side of the road by a tractor trailer, and their firefighters had, traumatic injuries, and they were able to, the ones that were okay were able to help them right there because they had the training and the knowledge. So whether it be for fellow public safety people or for citizens during emergency, you already had an extra huge bit of knowledge that they have that they can use at any time. Like we said before, it's an increased number of firefighters. I think ideally we'd want firefighter paramedics, so that's an extra 1-2 firefighters on a scene, which can make a big difference, especially when you first arrive. And then kind of this community piece, safer community, quality community, it was talked about as well, but you want people that live in the community, are part of the community, and when you have an emergency, you want someone that you know or you've seen to be there, not someone that was assigned there for that week and then they're going to be gone. I don't know the statistics on it, but I would imagine that you get a better quality of service, not necessarily intentionally, just I think there's something more about that happens when you live with your neighbors and you're helping them. I think it helps.
One of the benefits that, as well as Jody said, we were able to keep Matt here, one, because of the challenge that kind of putting a system like this provides, as well as the more training and educational opportunities that becoming an EMS provider offers as well.
So obviously there would be some challenges to this. One of the challenges is educating the public when we finally do make our decision about what we're going to do. That's a lot of information to get out to people, and that's no different in any other public function when you're doing something, trying to get that information out. And this is a lot more information, or it will be. And so getting that out to the public will be an issue. Finding the personnel, finding the paramedics. There's a paramedic shortage nationally, so that could be an issue. But hopefully, if we, provide benefits and decent salary, then that won't be a huge issue. Making sure all the towns can come in on it. No one has to come in on this, so providing the incentive to other towns and getting them to work with us, that will be a challenge. And then obviously the money, and there's two pieces of that. There's the capital costs, there's buying ambulances, there's buying the equipment, there's buying the bandages and all that kind of stuff, and then there's the personnel costs, which would be a decent amount because you're paying for paramedics and a supervisor and things like that. So a lot of, it's going to be a lot of money. It's going to be way more than the figures you saw on that graph. But then again, those figures we saw on the graph are just going to go up too. And if you want a good quality service that's always there when you need it, then you're going to pay a lot of money, whether you do private or public. So you might as well pay a lot and you have the control than pay a lot and not. Is how I see it.
Question. How would it work with Rockland? We'd have to have a unit stationed here in Camden, which means you'd have to purchase a new unit. You have to have the facility to put it in, so forth and so on.
So I think one of the benefits to working with Rockland is that they already have the EMS system in place. They have all the protocols and everything, how it works. They do a really good job. And so instead of trying to recreate the wheel, using them, and they can kind of help coordinate how we do it. And one of the ideas we've been throwing around, is paying for a Rockland ambulance to sit in the Camden station. And so it's their ambulance, it's their paramedics. We're paying for that.
How many units do they have now?
I think they have 3 ambulances, and they have 5 or 6 on staff at a time, I believe, with some varying level of medical training. Yeah, and I think it's the biggest thing with Rockland is they're doing it. So instead of us trying to figure out how to do it ourselves, the billing and all that, they already have all that in place, and as long as they're willing to help, I think that's a benefit.
Has there been any discussions with Rockland on this issue? How receptive are they?
Very positive, yeah.
So what would happen with the transfers then? I'm assuming that this is just emergency support, it's not transfer. How would that get handled?
So I would imagine that Northeast would probably continue doing transfers because that's where you make the money, or some private company would come and do it. And if not in the future, maybe that might be something we look into is, okay, well, let's get this 911 established, and then maybe we'll take one of our old ambulances. By this point we've got even newer ones, and we've got maybe an old one, and maybe we can hire someone per diem to go do those and kind of get into that a little bit just to make extra money. But I think in the initial first part, I think someone will come and do that, a private agency. So that's still
The interfacility transfers are handled under a contract agreement between their current provider, Northeast, and Maine Health. So it's a business agreement that they have to
So it wouldn't have
provide
anything
that
to do with-
service.
It wouldn't have anything to do with our budget. We
Right.
wouldn't
No.
sign a contract.
Right.
Kathy?
No, that was my question.
I was thinking back, maybe it's 10 years ago, when we had a building right there on the corner, and we had an ambulance service, and we gave it up because we were going to be ahead by using Northeast or some other service.
Well, we
And
didn't-
there was quite a community, well, I'm not sure fight's the right word, but there was a lot of discussion about it. And now it seemed to me we're back in the same place we were then, but sort of a difference. You're saying that Camden's going to take, the town is going to take the whole load. It's going to be part of our budget from now on and so on. Is that correct?
Well, we did not have an ambulance 10 years ago.
No, it was not ours.
It was
I
a
understand that.
private entity. Same thing as Northeast.
right.
It's a private entity that was providing the
They had a
service.
wonderful facility, but they got in a lot of trouble. I know that. Okay. But we left that system. But the system you're going to set up, you're going to have ambulances. You're going to have a garage to put them in. You're going to have staffing for it. That's big.
The idea, I think, that's being pitched, this is a regional type of thing with multiple towns involved, not just,
Right.
there'll be certainly a big contribution expected from each town. But again, I think the idea is that there'll be a sharing rather than an individual town responsibility, and that regionalization is the approach that is being explored to see if costs can come in at a reasonable level.
And what portion of this 5-town that you envision is Camden going to be? What percentage is going to
So
be
I think
ours?
that, I have no idea, and I think that's what the discussion is going to be in the next year with the select board and the groups that are, engaged in that. That's their work to figure that out and present it to us.
Is there any projection on the cost of this whole thing to Camden, town of Camden?
I think it's way too early to come up with that. Have you even, the basic group that's working on this, I'm not even sure as you've even met with all 5 towns directly towards their selectmen. I know that's in the process. You were just at Rockport last night or the night before?
Monday night, right.
And so the discussion has to go on with the 5 different communities, and it's not something that's going to happen overnight. And to come up with any kind of number now is purely pulling it out of the sky. So I think, from my perspective, it's a wonderful concept, and I'm fully support going forward with it, following the concept. To sit here and say, yes, we're going to do it right now, that can't be done, I don't think.
I don't think anyone's
I
asking.
just
No
wanna-
one's asking
I
us
just
to.
want to say, continue with the good work, keep working on it, because you're going in the right direction, I think.
Well, and I think some of the questions that you asked played into Drew's question about, apparatus replacement and things like that. And I think those are all a part of that bigger picture.
And I think another big part of this that they've been discussing is that we have a fire department of a limited number of full-time people. We continually have problems with getting enough volunteer people. If we have a bigger group of people involved in the ambulance as well as fire, then you've got a lot of cross-training. And if you have an event, then you have a bigger core of on-staff people that can respond. And right now, that is something that, as time goes on, we're having more and more problems with. We hired a new person for the fire department, which was a big increase to their budget. And if we have to hire 3 or 4 more full-time firefighters because we don't have the volunteers, that will really hit our budget hard. So when we ultimately look at this, there's going to be a lot of, it's not going to be simple, but there's going to be a lot of cross connections that will, I think they will argue, make it worth the money, and that's one example.
And what would you envision about the transport? Would you engage in transporting people? That's where the money is.
The interfacility transfers? No, I don't think initially that would be a part of the, of a system. No.
Does Rockland do transfers now?
No.
So I look at this budget, so we're looking at, in fiscal year 18, we had 32,000, now we fiscal year 19, we went to 140. Are we expecting that increase every 3 years?
Well, and this is kind of the worry that I have, which is a little different than the concerns that, our emergency services personnel have. So when we negotiated this new contract with Northeast, where we saw that huge increase in 1 year, we were told, and I truly believe this, that getting that huge increase was just to get them to a point where they were breaking even. So they're not even profiting from providing that 911 service to our communities. And I truly believe that because I understand how expensive it is to provide that service. That being said, how long are they going to go just breaking even and all the hassle it takes them to staff that and provide that service to our communities? At some point, they're not going to want to just break even.
Not a good business model.
And we have no control over that. And that's my one major concern is that, yes, a municipally run regional system, there are going to be upfront costs with it. It's not insignificant. I'm not going to tell anyone it isn't insignificant because it certainly will be. But once you make that investment, it's just the steady year-to-year wages and benefits that we talk about every year here, because there is no imperative for us to make a profit because we're providing a service to the community. Whereas with Northeast, would anybody who's a business owner sitting around this table want to just break even?
Well, I'll tell you, I wonder about it. Did they lowball it? It's like the bait and switch, right? You get in low.
I think there's no question
Is that what they did to you?
happened.
Interesting.
Let me add one thing about that. One of the situations that happened is there were a couple different companies that made applications to provide the service when the Camden First Aid stopped serving. And Northeast has a contract with all of the providers providing the transfers. They have the contracts with the nursing homes and things like that. So they've got that sewed up. So if they decide not to provide 911 for us for whatever reason, they still own those contracts. Another independent company cannot come in. Another for-profit company can't come in because they can only get 911 service. They can't get the transfers because that business is sewed up. So they've sort of got us. If they come to us with a new contract for EMS or for 911 and say, well, it's going to cost this much, we can't even go to somebody independent because somebody independent coming in and not being able to get the transfers is going to cost even more. So we're very much at their mercy.
Matt, how much more do you have?
This one slide, which is a little more positive, which is alternate funding opportunities. These are just a couple. There's more that can be said, but there's grants like the Stephen King grant that can pay for things for like equipment, the Assistance to Firefighters grant, which can be used for personnel. There are some big fire departments that use that to pay for firefighters. This new grant I saw last night, the Siren grant, just put in December. It hasn't even opened up yet, but it's for rural EMS services like what we would be doing, and then private donations, things like that. And an example of a private donation to Camden EMS is that 1953 Cadillac ambulance from back in the day. So there are other ways that even I think when we bring out a big number of whatever that is, hope, in reality, assuming, and I would imagine we'd get a lot of these grants because it'd be such a big project that I can't imagine that we wouldn't get a lot of help. That number will probably be significantly lower, I would imagine.
Right, and just to, that's more of the upfront capital costs. On an ongoing basis, Rockland has talked about how they have no need or desire to make revenue from this program. So the revenue that Rockland would collect from providing EMS services in our communities, they would put that funds in reserve to pay for future capital equipment costs. So really, the capital costs are just sort of a one-time setup fee for the system, and that's what we would look to offset with, grants and we've talked about, selling our own equipment that we have here in Camden that's redundant or that we wouldn't need if we're talking about truly looking at regionalizing our fire service and working more closely with them.
I think we've sort of kicked this around. I'd love to hear a motion on the budget item.
I have a question about the budget item. It says it's the first year of a new 3-year contract. And is that this fiscal year 20 or is that this current year?
Apologies, I didn't change the notes, so we ended up not doing a 3-year contract, we just sort of did a year to year. So this year it'd be a new, it'd be like a renewal of that.
Okay, so that was my question, is this the set figure for 3 years?
Yeah.
But no, it's just the 1 year.
Right, yeah, my apologies.
Thanks.
And can you remind us why it went from 32,000 in fiscal year 18 to the 140? I can't remember what the
I
discussion.
think that the reason was I don't think it was a big surprise to us really that the jump happened, but they came in and presented basically saying that, hey, we're not making the money we thought we were going to make. And if we're going to do this, we need this much money contributed, or else they don't do it. And so we don't really have a lot of choice about some of this, other than what we've engaged in discussing tonight.
One thing I can promise about, so if we were to go do a regional service, so that year between 18 and 19, it was like a 250%, 280% price increase. It will not be a 280% price increase to go from what we're paying Northeast now to paying for a regional service. So that, to help put it in perspective a little bit.
That's reassuring.
Yeah, it might be more.
No, it won't be more than that, no.
Robin, final question?
From a business perspective, what it sounds like we're doing is that we want to spend a lot of money capital money to take over the part of the business that loses money, and they're going to keep the part that makes money.
Well, I think your fire department and police department lose money too, if you want to take it from that point of view.
Northeast, I behave.
Well, we wouldn't run our emergency services for a profit. I mean, we just want good emergency services.
But what I'm saying is, we're not taking the part that doesn't make money, so that makes it even more expensive. Because
Well, but then it would be even more expensive because you'd need to have even more ambulances and more personnel to handle that aspect of the business.
I would love to entertain a motion on the budget item.
I'd like to move that we approve the amount requested by the town manager.
Second.
Okay, any more discussion? I think we'll have a lot of discussion about this over the next year or so. All those in favor of the budget item? Opposed? Thank you, the motion passes. I would entertain a resolution that thanks the fire department and the select board for looking into this topic and developing this much information. So the sense of the board is, thank you for looking at this important issue. Appreciate it. Are we set? Are you on lights? Oh, next item, okay. Emergency Operations Center budget, $500.
We accept it.
Yeah, that's a good
Second.
That's a good one.
Any more discussion? Those in favor? Thank you, the motion passes.
No, that's
All right, thank you, Chief. Thank you for showing us around the station earlier this year.
No problem, anytime.
It's always fun to stand next to a big fire truck. You know?
Still this
I
day.
feel like- that's right, just like third grade, you know? Yes, excuse us.
While you're going home and thinking about police cruisers, what I forgot to mention while I was up there, we used to get 2 years out of our cruisers. We have increased that to at least 4 years, so while we're spending more money, we're getting twice as long out of those vehicles. And while I was sitting there, I thought about that, and I thought, hey, that'll make it a little easier to digest. Thank you.
See you guys.
Who does lights?
I'll do lights. Yep.
Good job.
All right, so on to streetlights. So There's been a significant decrease in this budget because we recently, the select board approved me signing a contract with Real Term Energy to convert all of our streetlights over to municipal LEDs, or municipally owned LED streetlights. So the majority of the cost in this line in the past was really the rental, the rental that we paid to CMP for all of the, the streetlights that you see sort of out in the suburban areas of town, not the decorative fixtures. The town of Camden's always owned those, but all of the other ones, we don't actually own them, we just lease them from CMP, and their lease fees, as you can see, are quite significant. So by switching over to LED lights that we own, not just are we going to be saving money in energy delivery costs, but also by not paying the rental fees. And we're looking at about, I think it's a 4.5-year payback period. So really the upfront cost, it's a $160,000 project. And if we pay that back over a 4-year period, we'll own everything outright and our costs will decrease significantly. So while this has gone down in this area, you'll see over in the debt service, and I've highlighted it in red, that will be the, the principal payment that we'll pay for the project itself to convert everything over. So this year, there's no savings aside from the electricity savings, but in future years, you will see a significant savings from year to year from streetlights.
Any questions? Yes?
Yeah, so Audrey, you said that there's a rental component to those streetlights. Where is that in this line? What line item is that?
So that's the, it was in FY19, $58,000.
Oh, because that says electricity, but that's electricity and rental fee?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. CMP tariff, I think is what they call it on the bills.
I think
Yeah.
that's correct.
Any more questions? Motion?
So I'll make a motion that we accept the town manager's $8,500.
Second.
Any more discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Thank you, motion passes. And now we're on to section 5, Public Works.
All right, so for those of you who were on the budget committee last year, one thing that we talked about a lot was succession planning for Rick, recognizing that unfortunately he's not going to hang around here forever as much as we would like to keep him and beg and plead and try to. So last year everybody approved us converting one of the labor positions to an assistant director position. And the idea was that, it's somebody that we could kind of skill up with administrative duties, and it would just make it easier for, when Rick did make the decision to retire. Because truthfully, a lot of the success of the department now really depends on Rick being there. And if he were to not be there, it would be pretty much impossible to find one person to come in, have all the same knowledge and skills that Rick has, gained over a 40-year career doing this sort of work. So we ran into a little bit of trouble in that by not having that laborer position, we wouldn't have enough people on the crews to work them as efficiently or do everything that we needed to do. And so Rick and the folks over at the Public Works Department, really, they just couldn't make that assistant director position work. So we weren't able to hire it. So we said, okay, well, what we'll do is we'll come back next year and speak to the budget committee about adding a laborer position to Public Works. And so that's, it's included in the full-time wages, adding a laborer. So then we would be able to go and actually recruit someone as an assistant director. So that's kind of the most significant change in regards to the operational budget. Did you have anything else about any of your lines that you wanted to point out?
No, most of my lines are all pretty much the same, except for building maintenance. That's an increase because of roof needs to be shingled. It's leaking severely right now, so I don't think there was anything else that was much of an increase, except electricity, which that's crazy. They're charging twice as much for electricity this year than I've ever paid. So Last bill I had was over $600, and 300 something of it was a delivery fee, which I don't know what that is, but I'm just getting charged for electricity now, I'm getting charged for
The
service.
two different fees on your electric bill?
Yeah.
One for the power and one for the delivery
Oh,
fee?
yeah.
I noticed there's a $5,000 increase between what Audra is recommending and what you had asked for on sand and salt. Are you comfortable with?
Well, you never know from year to year what the salt prices are going to be and sand prices when we get them. It goes out to countywide bid. This year, we've used an excessive amount because there's been so much ice. We had $5,000 decreases, all right, because we do have a reserve account, winter reserve account of roughly $100,000. So we have plenty of money to back it up if we need it.
Yes, Mark? I do have a question about your overtime budget. 2 years ago, for the 18 year, it was excessive. And obviously, you're not planning on the same type of thing. There must have been a reason for that being that much higher that year.
Yeah, a lot of years it will go over because it depends on how much time you spend downtown. Nights that we have to come in and clean up downtown, we were only in about 4 times this year. So if we're down there a lot, that's an all-night procedure.
A lot of that overtime is winter maintenance, plowing, and
Yes, yeah, majority of it is. We have a little bit.
we had a bunch of extra storms
Yeah.
for that
Rick
year.
scheduled only one storm per 40-hour week this year, so it's, all right.
That's just poor scheduling.
When you created that assistant director position, was that just taking an existing position and upgrading that?
Yes.
And so now you're asking for another whole FTE to?
Yes, yep.
And will that person help with the overtime if we get that labor
Yes.
position?
And that's only $32,000? Am I doing my math right?
32 in wages, yep.
And only a slight increase in health insurance because we'd already planned for it last year.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
So the health insurance does not increase very much from last year's budget, even though you're adding another person onto the staff.
Right, that's strictly just anticipated rate increase by Maine Municipal. And the laborer that we're proposing, we put it on the, kind of in the middle of the scale, based on experience wherever we hire, and so that is going to be at about $38,000. The increase from this year to next year also takes into account, we hired from within, from another department, and brought them from Parks and Rec over to Public Works at a lower rate of pay, so that sort of cushioned the increase to next year's budget, wages.
I know that you have a number of people that work kind of split. They work for Parks and Rec part of the year and Public Works.
Not Public Works.
You don't have that anymore?
No, that's part of the snowball and public, and Parks and Rec, that's a different department than Public Works.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Snowball was split up into 2.
I thought you had some people that worked part of the year plowing for you that were
No?
employees out, okay.
No, it may have been over the years, once in a while you get another person out of another department that wanted to do it, but a lot of, they don't get the same pay that they were getting. It was only like $12 an hour and they were making 15, and they wanted what they were getting paid, and that wasn't in the budget.
I know Pixley used to work like 3 or 4 different places.
Yeah, the harbor master
Yeah.
from way back when Jim French was here worked up there plowing. He came up to the Public Works for the winter, but that doesn't happen anymore.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Scott?
So did I hear it right that the person, you don't have an internal candidate that's going to be kind of coached along with you? You're going to have to hire that assistant position?
Not necessarily, but when it came, when we were looking at potentially an internal person and putting them up to an assistant director. The worry was that by taking anyone, not just being a person down on the the
So you're gonna,
cruise.
but that's what I mean. So if you hire a laborer, do you have someone internally? Because that would, I would think, be helpful to the department if there is an internal candidate versus starting from scratch to charge someone's brain full of.
There's definitely people who are interested
Okay,
internally.
okay,
Yep.
great.
Any other questions, comments, motions?
I move that we accept the town manager's
Okay,
proposal for 1,126,700.
Second.
any more discussion? Ready to vote? All those in favor of the public works budget? Opposed? Thank you, the motion carries. Okay, we are now on to more public works, streets, highways, bridges, and sidewalks.
And I think that's all pretty much the same, right there.
We're getting some new
Think there's any
sidewalks.
increases?
You have a big jump in paving, which I guess was in last year's budget as well, but carries forward, going from 207 in the FY18 up to 270 last year plus 270 this year.
Yeah, I don't always complete the paving in one year. We like to carry money in case there's some kind of a tragic thing happens that we need money for some kind of road repair. We have big sinkholes or washouts and that sort of thing. So then that gets blended into in the spring budget of paving and anything I can do before July 1st.
Unfortunately, given what's happened this winter, I don't think that.
There's going to be a lot of
Yeah,
patching.
there's going to be a lot of leftover.
Yeah, and that's you'll see in the CIP plan there that I have for a piece of machinery to help with that.
Why is there a difference between the department head's recommendation and the town manager's, that extra 5,000? That dispute between the two, you have 5,000. Why, what's the,
For street maintenance?
yeah,
Because over the past, I've never really spent that whole line, so we reduced it.
Streetlights will continue to be painted every year.
But that depends on you. Yeah, it's been money for that.
That's in the budget?
Change the
Yeah, it's
color.
in that.
I'm not sure I'm clear on that. The department head recommended 50,000.
Yeah.
The town manager recommended 45.
Yeah, I recommended 45 because I looked at Rick's actuals and I wanted to, recommend something that was closer to what was actually being spent over the past few years.
If you look back to FY16, each year, it was underspent.
Robin?
What was the jump in sidewalks last year? It went from 6,000 to 20,000?
Well, we always try to get as much in there as we can to try to do a lot more work on sidewalks.
But is the actual going to come in close to that 20?
I'm not sure where we are right now on it, but it could possibly, yes, because I have a lot of work to do on what we call pave-arounds on some utility poles on sidewalks that sort of where the utility poles are right in the middle of the sidewalk, and the sidewalk plow has to drive around the pole and go up on the people's property and tear the lawn up and everything, so I'm going to try to build a pave around that, and also to make it easier for ADA people that have to
So
use a
that was-
wheelchair or something to try to get around it.
So that wasn't like one big project that was last year?
It's not for all one big project, that's more of maintenance, but if we might do large sections of a sidewalk, you might have to do, 100 feet of it or something, so.
This is just maintenance. This is not the major sidewalk projects that they're talking about in other places in town.
Right, like if we do Pearl Street this year, that sidewalk would be part of that line.
Get it in there. Vote now. I understand that too.
I've got a question for Rick up here. Rick, one of the things that we were just discussing up here, we noticed that This year, it seems like the pothole situation is the worst I've ever seen. Is that going to affect your street maintenance budget? Because it seems worse than ever. Have you sort of looked into what's going to take this year?
It's possible, because I do take a lot of, we do buy paving out of that, and I also use the paving line, because if we do a bigger patch, that will come out of paving, street paving line. But yeah, there's a lot of potholes this year.
Potholes on Park Street.
Cold weather.
Yes.
and-
Yeah. I'm just sort of curious if this is going to be an unusually bad year.
Yeah, it's possibly could go over, who knows?
Any other, yes?
Who's responsible for salting sidewalks? Is that the homeowner or the town?
We do, the town does it.
Salting?
Yes.
Because like, for example, on
Salt
High
or
Street,
sand.
it's very hilly and very icy.
Where
And
at?
there's High Street, very hilly, very icy, and there's a lot of like overnight black ice that
Yes.
forms. And it seems like that's less salted than other areas in town that I walk that are sufficiently salted.
Well, he goes around and does the sidewalks. I mean, this year we've been out putting more sand and salt on the sidewalks than any year at all. I mean, it seems like almost every day. Some days he may not get around to them all. One day here last week, the sander wheel fell off the sander, and we had to go pick it up with a backhoe and load it on the truck and bring it up and work on it, so they didn't even get finished that day. So there's like that, and they spend a lot of time on the sidewalks this year.
Do you sort of prioritize the business district over the more residential
Downtown
areas?
is the priority because there's so many more people walking around down here. So you hit that first thing and then try to get it up to the school after this. And then he starts working on the outlying sidewalks.
Okay. Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the department head's request of the 40, whatever that amount is, the $5,000 extra, basically because of the extra potholes this year.
We have a second?
Second?
What did he ask for? The department head?
So we have a motion pending on the department head request. Any more discussion? All those in favor? I'm sorry, can you give me the hands again one more time? And opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, next item is parking lots.
All right, so the significant increase in the parking lot budget is really due to the lease purchase agreement that we entered into with Knox Holding LLC. Sorry, I'm trying to bring it up on the screen so everyone can see it. So the agreement is for the Knox Mill parking lot as well as the Knowlton Street lot that used to be the former skate park. We're on a plan to lease them over a 15-year period and then purchase them from the owner at the end of that. Title will be conveyed to the town. So that number was in the capital improvement plan last year, and now that it's sort of been approved, it's moved over into the parking lot lease line, which accounts for that difference. That is offset with TIF revenue, so we'll talk about the TIF when we come to the revenue side of it, but really it kind of is a wash in terms of property tax hit because the TIF is a set aside and it's a different stream of revenue, and we can go into it more, but it offsets that expense.
Which parking lot is this at Knox Mill? Is this the one behind the buildings?
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's all the lots behind the buildings, with the exception of the lot in the middle that's the, the parking deck with the parking underneath. But it's pretty much everything else besides that.
Does the maintenance line on that include signage for that?
It does not.
Where would that fall?
I think that line would be a good place to put it.
I had a group of people here last Tuesday night, or last Thursday night we were here, and everybody was supposed to be parking up there, and 30 people, but between snow removal and signage, nobody knew what they were doing. And, I mean, that's just one group, so that goes on all year long.
Yes.
Well, that's the signage for everything in town, like take out of our sign maintenance line.
Because we had, several years ago, we had a really concerted effort to be directing people up there, and I realize this is, we want to change that, so I think we need to make sure we have that somewhere.
I agree. I think that the design committee, they want to work on a wayfinding project. So really, the reason I didn't put anything into this budget was because I didn't really know exactly what the cost would be, because we kind of need to go through that exercise. But certainly, if anybody was interested in putting in a placeholder, I think that that would be a very good idea, because, you know, I can see in this financial year us being ready to do that, and I think it would be advantageous.
How much signage are we talking about?
That's why, yeah, I have no
Yeah,
idea.
I mean, that's,
Even if it's something I mean, I don't know, if the design committee is going to get a hold of it, it's going to turn into wayfinding for the whole town. It could be a year before we come up with those signs. We need something that's getting people in there and getting people up there, so I
Yes.
well, we have a sign like a P for parking that's on Washington Street, and there used to be one on Knowlton Street. I don't know if it's still there or not.
There was signage down here at the corner of Washington and Mechanic. We had more signage out on Route 1, making sure that people knew where they
Right.
were from both directions, so.
I have to check and see if those are still all up right now, but right now we can't do too much with
Right.
putting posts in the ground until it falls
We
out.
had a
So.
sandwich board sitting down here that was always flopping over, but just to make sure.
So,
Do we want to plug some additional funds in there for signage? Is that what you're saying?
no, we're not. She's not saying anything. Robin is sort of leaning that way. Are you planning to make a motion?
I wouldn't have a clue what that would be. I'm just,
Well, that's what I'm saying. If there's not much, I mean, it just comes out of my general line for the street signs that I use all over town.
And where is that line item?
That's in the maintenance line. It's $5,000 in the public works. 1001, 1010.
4,500.
That's 4,500.
We already passed that one.
Can we do that before the next fiscal year, maybe, though?
Oh, I see.
I mean, budget for this coming, then that's kind of by default saying we're not going to do it until the next fiscal year, which,
It's something we talked about in the working group recently.
let's just do
Parking
it.
lot signage.
Put some signs up that,
Well, just add some more money into that line there, maybe, or put it in the parking lot.
And I think Allison's just saying we spend it out of this year's.
Oh,
FY.
we just would hate to commit to waiting until
Yeah.
next year.
Oh, no, that's what I was saying, was just take out my general maintenance line for.
Out of FY19.
And if you overdraft, then,
Yeah.
Out of 19.
but we don't, I mean, the signs probably don't have to be too fancy, right?
Yeah, well, we follow the MUTCD
Right.
Yeah.
signage.
Right.
Of course.
It's a post that can get
That helps.
expensive.
Who pays for the paving of the parking lots under the lease purchase?
So we'll be doing the maintenance.
That includes patching, paving, all
Yes.
of that?
Yep.
Is that part of the $2,000?
Yeah, I've put in a little bit of money to do maintenance work there. There's a little bit of paving, but it's mostly going to be the kind of landscaped areas and cleaning that up and some tree removal and.
We have a parking lot reserve money too, that we can use, if we need to there.
I think we're going to pull a median out and, yeah, there's some maintenance and cleanup work that needs to
I mean,
happen.
it's going to be a lot more than $2,000 worth of work you're describing.
I mean, hopefully not.
Yeah, you never know. I don't know what we're gonna get into yet.
Yeah.
Pretty good shape, that Knox Mill part.
Is there a possibility that the farmer's market might use the Knox parking lot again? That's revenue coming in.
So we talked about it with them for this year while the tannery was being cleaned up, but the tannery cleanup, it looks like it's not going to happen this summer. It'll probably happen next summer, next construction season. So there's a strong possibility that they're going to be at the mill, not this summer, but next summer. but they really don't prefer being at the mill to being at the tannery.
So, back to signage again. Robin or Sandy, do
Sounds
you?
like you guys are comfortable, just, I move that the select board stay on top of that and make sure we get some.
So, okay. Any more discussion on the parking lease and the maintenance? Mark?
Make a motion that we accept as presented.
Okay, the town manager recommendation is $67,000.
They're both the same, so.
Yep.
Second.
Okay. Any more discussion?
I got one question.
Yes.
Does this, so you officially have a lease now in that parking lot?
Yes.
Does this mean that the big buses coming in from what we've discussed in the past are going to be out there now? Or are they still going here?
We're going to direct them to be up there. I've talked with the chamber about, or was it the chamber? I forget, Cruz, somebody, about how we would much prefer if they're going to be parked, just sitting there and no passengers coming in and out, they go up there.
And then pick up there?
Yeah, disembarking, embarking, they can be there, but I think it's a better spot for them.
Okay. Ready to vote? All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And now we're on to the tree program, where we've, is this Public Works as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it looks like we've got, again, a variance between department head and town manager on tree maintenance, $10,000.
I know, I saw that.
So what was the reasoning for the department head's total that was 50% of previous budget?
Well,
Was there something going on that was?
there's more and more trees that need to come down all around town, and with the emerald ash borer on its way, trying to be proactive there. Anything that's an ash tree that's dead or dying, we want to try to get down now before it really gets expensive. And we've done some testing here with the state entomologist has come down and tested a couple of trees. You do a girdling of a couple ash trees to see if anything comes. But we haven't yet, and they do have traps around in Camden in spots, and nothing is here yet. But the way it's moving around, I mean, it's in southern Maine now, in Berwick, and just off the New Hampshire border, or Madagascar, I guess it is, up north, and it's coming down. And I think if I remember right, the spread of the EAB is not a lot if it's natural. It's a few miles a year, but it's all being transferred through firewood and who knows how else. But if someone in southern Maine in that area brings their firewood up north, it's up this way or something, camps at Camden Hill State Park, then they're here. So it's that money. We started a reserve fund, and I don't have my reserve line here. So did we put money in that?
Yeah, this year we have put 5,000 in, and then we're budgeting for another 5,000 for FY20.
So we'll have 10,000.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, Dick.
Last year or 2 years ago, practically all the trees on Pearl Street came down because of bad wood. Has the tree warden picked out trees this year on what areas of
Well,
the
the tree
town
warden
that have
doesn't.
come down?
The tree warden doesn't do that. I'm the tree warden. And I don't do that. The garden club does that. We have a lady lives on Park Street, Priscilla, and she homeowners participate in a program with the town if they want to replace trees. There has been a few trees replaced, but not everybody goes with that. And I think we have 6 this year that we're going to be replacing trees around town. I'm not sure of all the spots, but I have 2 or 3 spots that the town's going to be doing.
Is there any contingency funds for, like we had that severe windstorm last year or a couple of years ago that took down a lot of trees? Is there a contingency fund that covers that kind of activity?
No, that would, if we needed money for anything there, it usually comes out of my operating budget, but we cut it up and take care of it. And sometimes if it's extensive enough, FEMA gets involved, we get money back that way too.
Yeah, like from that particular windstorm, we were reimbursed $19,000 for damage.
How much is the state grant, the Project Canopy? How much was that grant?
So when we last got it, I think it was about $8,000.
I think that was, I want to say it was a little less than that, but
Yeah.
in that area, in
Yeah.
that ballpark.
So it sounds like the discrepancy between your two budgets is the $10,000 reserve. Is that what you're doing, Audra? You've got
Well,
10,000.
really, again, I just kind of looked at actuals. You know, really, it's, if the major concern is EAB, because it's not here yet, we might want to think about putting more in that reserve fund if everybody wants to look at, you know, more aggressively addressing that problem. Really, it just, you know, it just depends on where we want to put it and what Rick thinks he's going to be able to get done this year.
I have several trees right now that are just waiting to come down that arborists are ready to take down as soon as the weather's right for it and everything. So that budget will be going down quick.
Just a kind of a thought, over on Park Street, as you come in from Route 1 towards Pearl Street, there's a group of trees along there that were planted underneath the power lines, and now they're being trimmed like goalposts where they're going out around. I think the trees are embarrassed that they have to look like that. Can you maybe look into doing something about those, or?
Depends whether they're in the right of way or not.
Okay, is that possibly, yeah, if it's private property, you have no say on the matter.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And even if it's not, even if it's in the right of way, the homeowner it's still their tree as opposed, the town just has the right to do something, trim it, prune it, take it down if it's dead or dying or something like that. But for aesthetics, we don't spend money on just taking a tree down because somebody doesn't like it or anything like that. Because there is a shade tree ordinance, which we're trying to keep shade trees in town.
Are you talking about the way that it was pruned, though?
Yeah, it was planted, they were planted directly underneath the power lines as they grow up. They're much taller than the power lines. And they've just taken a U out of the middle of it, and it's growing up like a set of goalposts. And there's a hole. When they do plant these shade trees and the thing, try not to plant them under power lines.
Exactly, we already have that. Because when the garden club is supposed to keep an eye on that.
Any more questions on this?
Just clarify what you were talking about. Is the reserve in here? It sounded like you haven't, is the reserve elsewhere in this? So if we go with Audra's recommendation, there's already money being put in reserve, and when we get to that, we could up that if we wanted to, because.
Yeah, so the reserve will be when we talk about, you know, like capital planning, capital projects, but you could certainly.
This is still higher than what actuals have been for the last several years, so.
Yeah, and I'm comfortable with what Audra has there as long as we beef that reserve up.
I like that idea.
So if you want now, so that nobody forgets, where is what page number is the reserve accounts and the line?
Page 39. It's tree conservation. It's the third one from the bottom, and it's proposed at $5,000.
So you
An extra
so we
five
put
in that?
5 in last year.
And 5 this year. So if you wanted to, you know, I think it was a $10,000 difference. So you could do 15,000 in there instead of 5, and that would be the same amount of funds that Rick was thinking of.
And we'll get the reserves next week. So make a check mark on page 39. Any more questions on the tree program, the budget? Motions?
Manager's budget line of $37,000 for the tree program.
Second that.
Okay, we have a motion made, seconded. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
I'll move we adjourn.
Well, before you do, let's just check into next week. We're going to look at the library, parks and recs, cemeteries, the dams, and then we're going to get into debt service, capital reserves, capital improvements, and revenues. That'll be pretty meaty. The second part of that is sort of some fairly intense budget discussion. So we might want to give ourselves time to really take a look at those things in the second half. Yes.
The last two items next week are the snow bowl and the water treatment plant. Those are both basically, we just look at them, we don't necessarily vote on anything on those. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think we don't have any right to really suggest budget or not. I think unavoidably it's an interesting couple of topics, and we'll end up taking some time on it just because of its relevance to the town. So I think, again, a good point. We're going to have a pretty full slate.
And those are the two reports that were given out to us earlier.
Yep, and
Okay.
also, I wanted to give more information to you ahead of time about some of the capital projects. So the packet that I gave you at Police Cruiser at the top, it's got memos from all the department heads that have, capital projects or equipment that they're proposing for this year, and just sort of an explanation of what it is, why they need it, the details around the project. So if you have any questions between now and then, either myself or any of the department heads would be more than happy to talk to you in more detail. There are a couple more that I just wasn't able to get to you tonight, so I'm going to email around to everybody when those are done as well, so that you have all of that information on like the seawall, river restoration, and some of those projects.
Okay, Steve, your motion?
There's a second.
Right, we're adjourned. Thank you.